presentation introducing methodologies and tools, and then the design exercise. But then definitely it's a day dedicated again to design in group and to discuss. Okay, at this stage today is on product level. You remember you develop a system, an offer model, a win-win offer model. Now we are going to the product level. Okay. So as I did for the method for system design for sustainability, I'm going to introduce to you the method for MPDS. There is a P instead of an S, stand for product design for environmental sustainability. Okay. The aim is to show to give you a kind of a storyboard of what could be made. If you want to know more, it's on the book. You have everything there. All right. You can download it for free or whatever, or on the Lens network and so on. Because of course, you will be using only a couple of tools, and because the purpose of the design exercise is another one, not to learn everything, and so I'm going to introduce now the method for product design for environmental sustainability applied to clothing. So here there are some processes as we had for the MSDS. Some are to assess the environmental, in this case only the environmental impact. In the case of the MSDS, it was even possible to assess the socio-ethical dimension. Okay, something we didn't do, but here is a little difference about that. And here are the main phases of a product, and inside you find the phases of the MPDS. Here is not that much to say, if not that, of course, the scope is to support designer, especially fashion designer, when now it's applied to clothing in any different context to design sustainable, environmentally sustainable clothing product. In this case, the tool are most of them for free, because life cycle assessment is not free, or at least there is an open LCA. We presented, I think, the first lecture. Luca, you introduced some of the tool. It's not so user friendly, so hopefully in the next year it will be. But that far it is not. So this is not available on the website, but the other tools, as well as some of those that we are going to use today and tomorrow, are free of charge and in open access, as you know. Okay, just to give you a storyboard, what happened if we are in the strategic analysis, when we design a brief of, when it's given to us a brief of a product to be, in this case, of course, designed with a low environmental impact. One key action that we can do is indeed, and here I make an example of a jeans, just to have a kind of a reference to this, to make a life cycle assessment. You remember this? It was a methodology to analyze in a quantitative way the environmental impact of a product. You know, putting together climate change, eutropization, toxicity, and so on, all this impact. Okay. And when you do this, you have to say why, when it's a life cycle assessment, why we are doing this. We are designers, so we are doing this to help achieve the best development of a jeans or a clothing with a low environmental impact. So to profile, but even to identify priority in relation to the strategy, the life cycle design strategy. You remember when I'm speaking about life cycle design strategy, since this was a lecture that we did last week, Luca introduced them. Life cycle are the strategy related to product design, okay, with specific guidelines to product design. They are somehow similar, but we are speaking about system and not product and other things, okay? Then you have to define a functional unit. That was very important, you know, even functional design. So I take even this chance to come back to a key concept in low environmental impact clothing. We have not only to assess a product in the life cycle, but we have to assess even in relation to a performance, okay, a function. In this case, it could be, we said, the wear of a of a pair of jeans for 1 year, and then you have to even define a few other details that, for example, that the lifespan is in average is 2 years, and that we wash the weekly the jeans and so on, because this is then determining even the consumption, because this is a quantitative, LCA is a quantitative assessment. And then the boundary, and the boundary in this case is all the life cycle phases. And so what you have to do, you remember, you have to go to, we are not going to do that, okay? But in the methodology, yes, indeed, you have to do this, or you can do that. You have to know all the material and the weight, all the processes, so pre-production and production of the product. You have to know all the other processes of distribution, use, and disposal. So in use, for example, we are washing, and so we have to know per functional unit. So per 1 year, how much is the consumption of kilowatt hour, how much is the consumption of detergent, and so on, so that we can insert this into the software that makes this. Then distribution, and then of course even disposal. So all the data related to this. And this is a typical result that I may have. This is, we made it. So we made a life cycle assessment, taking some average data of a reference blue jeans. And so this is a kind of a result that we may have. Okay, so we know that in pre-production we have a very high impact, in production this, and then in the other phases. But you remember that if we have a high impact in the production phase, this is not only to say a pre-production phase, is the phase in which we produce material. Okay, it's not just the matter of the material, so reducing the amount of material or selecting better material. How we can reduce the impact in pre-production is even through extending the life, okay? Because if we extend the life, we avoid some pre-production in relation to the functional unit, okay? So all those reasoning are very important, okay? And, so, and many times forgotten and misunderstood, all right? So this is really take in mind, please. But we can make even a qualitative assessment if you don't have a, so this you can do in case you want to do a qualitative assessment and you don't have an LCA, or you're not able, no one taught you how to make a life cycle assessment, or the company you're working with is not convinced to do it. And so Luca will tell something more about this, so I'm going very briefly, but basically here there are some checklists. And the checklist are helping you to understand whether the reference blue jeans has a problem in relation, in this case, for our toolkit, for our tool, in relation to the strategy. So for clothing life extension, is there a problem? And so you highlight whether there is a problem. And you do this for all of the strategies. And when this is made, of course, if you have made an LCA, you have a strong quantitative support to be able to do what? Because this is the aim, to come out with some priority definition. So which is the strategy that is most promising to reduce environmental impact of my cloth, of the reference, the extension of the life, the reduction of material, the reduction of energy consumption in use, or which is the one, okay? Okay, you can do this, you will not do this. And this is then highlighted in another tool, which is part of a toolkit, which is called X toolkit, that will be better presented by Luca right after, even because two tools of this toolkit you are going to use, okay? Or three, even the radar diagram, but not in this case. So these priority are highlighted here. So for example, some strategies has a high priority, medium priority, no priority, or low priority, okay? And this is key important to be understood. Then what you do, and this is something you are going to do, again, as you did for the system innovation, you are going to work on idea generation, okay? So it's an important moment, and you're going to use idea boards, and these idea boards are related to the 6 criteria or strategy. We want, if you want, we add even design for cloth disassembly, so the 7 strategy, with the guidelines that were introduced by Luca the other time with some example. So you will find those strategies and the guidelines there inside. So it will be an occasion while, you know, brainstorming over this, to go through this, to understand and to discuss with us and blah, blah. Okay. So it's a key moment, and for me important. Okay. So among other tools, this is a good tool to be used. All right. Anyhow, this is for each of the strategies. So you have one strategy, you have the guidelines, you have example, and then you drag and drop idea, basically as you did for the system, but here is on product. So guidelines will be different, and example, some example could be similar, but described in a different way. Then what you are going to do, again here, there is, after a divergent moment, you are converging. So you are selecting idea. You are not taking the idea, in this case, into the innovation diagram, which was on a system level. It's more important to look to a scenario. In this case, we look in relation to the strategy. So you will position into the radar diagram the most interesting idea that you have selected, and so this is the first thing. And then you will decide which of these idea will be the best to start up, to have a draft of your concept. Okay. Then there are other 2 tools. To call them tools is a little bit trivial. It's they are a way of representing the product. Okay. We call this exploded life cycle diagram of the concept, in which you highlight for each of the component, which is the material, the weight, even though it's a concept, the process of transportation, transformation, the transportation, if something is going to happen in use, if need to be substituted or something like this, then what is happening in the disposal phase. Okay. So you give a representation, is a life cycle exploded view. It's like an exploded view of a product, as you can do even in clothing, but with all of the product. But you highlight this. This is very helpful because we put quantitative data there inside to make a life cycle assessment. Okay, even though a concept is not so precise, but you can guess about the material with some software. I don't know, in fashion, with some software, when you design a draft, you have the volume, then you have the specific weight of a given material, and then the volume for the specific weight, you know, the weight of the material. And so you have this information which is the same for the production, is the same for the, it can be used for the transportation and so on. So you can perform a life cycle assessment, a simplified life cycle assessment. Okay. You are not going to do this, but I want you to be aware of. Another way, very simple, you can do in different way to give a representation of the environmental quality of your concept is to highlight, to give maybe a couple of drawing or whatever, maybe the same exploded view. It's up to you, but to highlight what are the characteristics that describe the quality of your concept in relation to a given strategy. Okay. So this is something not to be done today, but tomorrow you will make a drawing close to this. Okay. So there are the strategies, and this is there beside. And if you are working, following the strategies, this is coming quite easily, but it's a good way of explaining why a product is, a clothing product is with a low environmental impact, because many times we are not doing that in a correct way. Okay. Then what we can do, we can make an assessment of the concept. Again, with a life cycle assessment. So here we have quantitative data. There is the standard genes and the new concept. Hopefully it's with a lower environmental impact, maybe even lower, who knows. But you can make even, and you will be doing this, a qualitative assessment of the concept. And how you are going to analyze this, you are going to analyze, to assess, to evaluate if you have follow the guidelines that were suggested, okay? Did I follow how many I follow or not, partially or not, or something like this, okay? There are different ways, simplified, normal, and deep. You are going to use a normal, a medium one, but even this will be better explained right after by Luca. But it's a way to assess the product in relation to the strategy. So did I apply? Did I do all I was able to do? Then this is weighted, if you did something, so it could be that I have a radical improvement or an incremental improvement or no improvement, or maybe I have even a worsening because of other reason. This is weighted by the priority, because maybe one strategy has a high priority. So if you make a radical improvement with a high priority, your scoring will be high. And then the system is is able to make a total scoring. So you will have a score at the end, okay? Qualitative, but nevertheless, you have a scoring at the end. And this is an example of the normal evaluation, but I don't go into the deep of this, just to show you. And here, this is again the same tool, the radar that you saw before. But when you did this evaluation, so you realize that I have a radical improvement for clothing lifespan optimization. And now I cannot read. I make some guess. Okay, it will be shown in the radar. You see that the radar has 1, 2, 3, 4 circle. Okay, so the external is a radical improvement, double plus, and then what is more inside this plus is incremental improvement. Then no changes in between, where you have some circle as well with the priority for each of the strategy, and even the worsening, because this may happen, you know, while developing a concept. And so this is quite good, because you may understand that, for example, you didn't do that much for a high priority, and then you have to go back and rethink, maybe reusing again the idea board or something, and so to complement this type of assessment, the level of improvement with the priority, it's quite important. Okay, this is something that life cycle assessment is not telling you. Then you go on, and here I'm just saying, when you go on product detailing and engineering, you can use the life cycle assessment to select between one material and another material, one process and another process that can be, you can make an assessment, they are comparable, and you can do that. Another type of assessment that you can do when it's when you have defined all of the detail, you can compare the existing product. Now you have everything there on the table, drawn. It's ready to be produced, the product. You can make a life cycle assessment to compare your what you have designed, what will be produced, with the reference product. As well, you can make an environment, a qualitative assessment of that. So this was just to tell you a brief story. It was a story. I hope you get something about it. And here I go quick because the objective, I believe, were quite clear. One thing that I want to say is that this is a modular approach in the sense that you can, maybe a company has already made the life cycle assessment. like for example, it happens to us. And so we, from life cycle assessment, we go on with something else, or maybe they don't have that much money to make a life cycle assessment because it's too expensive. So we make a qualitative assessment. And so you can adapt the methodology, which has some processes and the tools connected to different kind of situation. You are just starting to design. You cannot have all the money to buy maybe a life cycle assessment that is quite usual today. Unfortunately, as I said, there is not an open access one, and so maybe you have to make a qualitative assessment, and you can do that. All right, so this is to say that is modular. One last thing, to make a connection with what we have learned in the previous lecture in terms and exercise in terms of methodologies and tool, the connection between the methodology that we saw the other week and what you just learned, start to learn right now, and you are going to partly use. Okay. So if I have to design a typical product service system, we have some phases: strategic analysis, we have the exploring opportunity. This is linked to system design. It's not linked usually in the description of the methodology to product design. But then when you go down, you have you are designing product and services, down from the concept level to the product concept level to the detail level of both product and services, to the engineering level of both product and services, and then you have communication. Okay. When we have the MSDS methodology, the one that you use, you remember we had some processes that were linked to some of the phases, and this where it goes. It goes here. So from when we define the model of the offer, okay, so before starting to define the product, okay, so maybe something related to the services, we are exploring opportunity, and then we go, let's say, to the service and design brief, or we rebrief what we have briefed before. Okay. And then this methodology is more linked up to here than down to the service level. Okay. So what we saw the other time, it was linked to the service level. You know, even some tools that you didn't use, the interaction table and something else. The methodology that I presented to you today, it's here. Even this, as I said, has some assessment processes and more orientating processes. And this is linked to this, where it enters when we are to the design brief. Okay. So we have the tools then, because we said, okay, we develop a great system concept to design long-lasting clothing, and then I don't know how to do that. All right. So the MPDS come into action, let's say, up to this phase. Okay. So you see the interlink of these two processes. And this is the end of the presentation.